Real estate investors are leaning on ChatGPT more and more, but can it actually price a deal, find the ARV for you? Well, in my 14 years of buying real estate, I've appraised literally hundreds of potential deals. So I went mano a mano with ChatGPT to find out if AI has become better than an old pro. Not only that, but I'm going to give you my frameworks for comping a house. I have a downloadable for you, and we're actually going to train a GPT bot. And I'll give you the exact instructions that I use. Now, round one, ChatGPT right out of the box. Nothing special. I'm simply going to ask, can you find the ARV of 5331 Connell Street in Chattanooga, Tennessee? Here we go. Now, it did some deep thinking here. It thought for about 60 seconds before it spit out an answer. And there are 4 things that it did that I really like. First, it picked 3 to 5 actual comps in the correct neighborhood. And we're going to define what comps and neighborhood actually means here in a little bit. Number 2, it normalized the pricing. Basically, it took those 3 to 5 comps and it said, okay, this house sold for $200,000 and it's 1,000 square feet of house. That means that it sold for $200 a square foot. It took the averages of the price per square foot of each one of these comps, and it applied that to our subject property. Number 3, it gives me a red flag checklist, or what we call DOAs, dead on arrival. We're going to get into that in just a second. Number 4, it hones in on an actual price. It says this house is worth $250,000 after you fix it up based on my analysis. Now, that's a really great start until I tried this. You see, ChatGPT is known for its hallucinations, where you think everything is working out all right, and then all of a sudden you get some crazy answer. And I knew that was a problem in the past versions of ChatGPT. And what we need, especially if we're going to make potential buying decisions based upon this machine, is we need confidence that it's giving us consistent answers and correct answers. So I tested it by giving it the same prompt, can you find me the ARV of 5331 Connell Avenue, in a different chat window. So it couldn't remember what it told me before. And the results I got were not very satisfying. Now, the value came back at $260K versus the $250K before. Not that big a deal. Like, you could comp a house by $10,000 difference pretty easily by just messing with a few numbers here. But the big problem is that the methodology that Chatty Cathy, used was totally different this time than the last time. So the 3 methods that a human appraiser uses is, number 1, the income approach. This is basically finding the value based upon the income of the property. Think about like the 1% rule here. If a property brings in X amount of rent minus the expenses for that rental, that's your net operating income. And a house can be valuated based upon the net operating income that it brings in every month. You do this especially on like multifamily or bigger apartment complexes, not so much on a single family home. Appraisal method number 2 is the cost approach, which is basically the cost to build a new property plus the value of the land that it sits on, minus depreciation, but we don't need to get too technical here. Cost to build that thing. And number 3 is a sales comparison, which is where you get comps from. Sales comparison, short is comps. That's the same thing as your after repair value, ARV, same thing as a BPO, a broker's price opinion. They all use a sales comparison method, which is the best way, especially on a single family home. And like I said, we are going to get into the details of exactly what you do to call something a comp. I even have a downloadable, so you're not going to forget it. Don't worry. But like I said, ChatGPT used this 4th method, which is the AVM approach, the automated valuation model. A short way to say that is the Zestimate, or Redfin's Redfinstimate. Trulia, I'm out. Not good with words like that. But the AVM approach is how they get those numbers, how they get those estimates. So what ChatGPT did was it took an average of all the different companies' estimates, the Zestimate, the Redfin, the Trulia, the Realtor.com, the et cetera, et cetera. It averaged out what they thought the value was today, and then they added what AI thought my improvements might be. And I'm going to read this exact quote. If the property is in average condition after full rehab, kitchen, bath, floors, window, etc., it might climb to the top of the market for that area. It is taking a freaking guess. It has no idea, because here's the thing. Zillow has a lot of data about a certain neighborhood, about an area, about all the areas. And it uses that data to compile its estimate. I'm not saying it's accurate, but what I'm saying is ChatGPT has no clue what the underlying data is. So it is total hogwash. They have no clue. And the reality is, guys, you should not care what the estimate is, what the value is today, because here is the only thing you really need to know, which is the 70% rule for flippers, or BRRRR, same thing. Flip, BRRRR, same thing. Here's the equation. Your target purchase price, what you want to buy it for, equals 70% of the after repair value minus your rehab cost. Quick example, if you have a house that you think would sell for $300,000, 70% of $300,000 is $210,000, and you think that the renovation is going to be $60,000, well, 210 minus $60,000 equals $150. That is your target purchase price. You don't give a crap about what the Zestimate is. $150,000 is what that house is worth to you today. I actually have a calculator that is a little bit more precise than the 70% rule that I actually use to take out on appointments when I'm buying houses. I'm trying to get that linked up for you guys. Hit me in the comments if that is something that you actually want, because I'm not really great with the computers and the coding. But if you want it bad enough, I'll figure it out. Okay, all in all, first round loss for ChatGPT, win for me, right? One method versus another method, a method that doesn't even work. They definitely lost that round, would not trust ChatGPT. So let's go round two. I'm going to ask for the house next door's ARV. That's 5333 Connell Avenue. And I'm asking for a specific reason. I got a little trick up my sleeve to see if ChatGPT can handle it all right. And she comes back with an ARV of $325,000. There are three humongous issues with this. Problem number one is there's not a house in that entire neighborhood in the last couple years that has sold for over $300,000. So the idea of this house being worth $325,000, albeit it is a bigger house for the area, but still, it's very unlikely that a house is going to sell for more than everything else sold for. And I do not recommend ever going that strategy. That is the gentrification strategy. That's the HGTV strategy, that you make a house so friggin' nice that you can sell it for more than anything else in the neighborhood has ever sold for. That is not the strategy that we use. We use the strategy of finding out what is true today, what things are actually moving for, and we find out how to get a house right up in the middle of there. Problem number two is that it did not account for a for sale, a listing that's out there that has gone stale. This is my little trick, because that's my property that I'm trying to sell and nobody will buy the dang thing. In fact, I've gotten one really low ball offer. But you see, this house is almost the same size as this bigger house, 5333 Connell. It's actually a little bit bigger than it. It is updated totally, did a full renovation. And the thing is, it won't sell right now for $275,000. So how does ChatGPT think that I'm going to sell this other house for $325,000? And that's one of our rules, by the way. We always look at houses that are for sale on the market to tell us about market conditions. All right, we're going to get into this. We don't use for sales as actual comps. However, a for sale that's not moving tells us about the market condition, because market conditions could be changing. And in this current climate, they absolutely are. But now the third problem that ChatGPT had on this round, which is the biggest one of all, and the real reason I picked this one is because I knew that 5333 Connell was at the edge of a 100-year flood zone, and I knew that my house was not in that. And so I wanted to see if she would actually pick up how big of an issue that was. And that is what we call a DOA, a dead on arrival, the ultimate red flag. And we'll get to those red flags, but here was what was funny to me is I actually opened up another chat and I asked ChatGPT, how much does being in a 100-year flood zone devalue my house? And it gave me the perfect response, a true response. And the TLDR there is that at 7% interest rates, today's interest rates, and the average cost of flood insurance monthly, it devalues the property by $30,000. And that's just the financial side, not talking about the stigma side. Like if you saw these other houses that weren't in a flood zone, you wouldn't really want the one that is in a flood zone for obvious reasons. Now, some real estate investors will buy houses that have issues like a flood zone. But for me, for the most part, those houses are absolutely dead on arrival. I'm not going to mess with that when there's thousands of other houses I can buy that don't have these issues. So here are the 7 issues. I'm going to read them off here. Number 1 is flood zones, unless all the houses are in a flood zone. So if you live in Florida or there's like some other places I've seen in the South where like every house is on stilts, obviously that's fine. It's not an outlier. It's not an odd bird. 2 is major easements. You got easements running through your property. I bought a house before that had a electrical utilities easement running right through the middle of it. I thought I was going to build another house right next to it, cleared the trees, looked up, there was power lines. I know, I'm an idiot. But anyway, couldn't build there, devalued the property for me. I had no clue that was there. Thought I was getting a great deal. 3 is zoning conflicts. Big problem out here where I'm at is there's a lot of houses built as a duplex, but they've changed zoning to R1 zoning where it can only be a single family home. So if you pull permits and start doing work on it, they literally make you take a as-built duplex and turn it into a single family home. So there's a lot of funky looking houses here. And of course, if you bought a house thinking you were going to have a duplex, then had to convert it to a single family, you kind of got screwed. Houses built into the setbacks. All right, there's setbacks, boundary lines of a property, and there's rules with the city on how close to that you can be when you build. And a lot of like DIY builds get built over that line or sometimes even on the boundary line itself. Big one is ceilings that are less than 7.5 feet. That is a big no-no for me. Unless I know without a shadow of a doubt that I'm going to hold that house as a rental till the day it needs torn down and I'm going to build something new. So I might buy like a really crappy house that's like barely livable, that's barely rentable. You know, safety, liability, it's all good there. But I know that I'm never going to renovate that house. I'm going to wait till it's not livable anymore, tear it down, build a new one. Not my number one strategy. Point is, 7-foot ceiling is never going to be as valuable as a regular ceiling. And the only way to make it work at all is really expensive. Finally, are what I call odd birds. They just are different than the rest of the neighborhood. You know, this house looks like an odd bird. And I don't want something that isn't computable. You know, that's the beauty of running comps is like, I know with a high degree of likelihood what that house will sell for because it looks like all these other ones that sold for that same amount. But if I have an odd looking one, well, how do I know? I don't know how to account for things that haven't happened already. Also why I don't buy rural properties because those are hard to comp. There's lots of different factors and I'm not smart enough to figure out all those factors, but I can figure out if that house sold and there's another one that looks just like it that's the same size right next to it, probably sell for the same amount. And if you can't find any of those deals, you just weren't working hard enough to find the deals. But that's not for this video. Needless to say, round 2 also goes to the investor here, ChatGPT. You suck, but now I'm going to train you, okay? It's the beauty of ChatGPT, all the AIs. You can actually train them, which basically means you code them. You provide them instructions that they look at every time they give you a response. So, like, where would I find a masterclass on comping a house? Turns out I made the world's most boring video. Get your coffee if you ever want to watch it. Hour long, tells you exactly how to find the ARV of a house. I go through lots of different examples in lots of different cities, so you can't say, hey, well, that wouldn't work where I live. It will. I've lived in lots of different places. But so you don't have to watch that, here's what I'm going to do is I go to my YouTube channel Write this down, guys. This is how you train a bot really easily. I find that video. I take the link for that video, and I'm going to go into Google and I'm going to type in YouTube transcriber. I'm going to put that link into the YouTube transcriber. They're going to give me the transcript for that hour-long video. And then I'll take the transcript. I'm going to go to ChatGPT and I'm going to say, hey, I want you to summarize this video for me. I read that. I like it. And then I say, hey, could you make me instructions for a custom GPT that I can feed in? Then I go to little make a custom GPT spot. And then I put in those instructions, tell it what it's doing, and give it a cool name like the Underwriter. And here we go. Now I can use ChatGPT custom to find the ARV of the house. And here are the main lessons that I gave her right here is the 3 things that make a good comp. Number 1 is features. Number 2, date sold. Number 3 is neighborhood. What do I mean by features? I guess I'll read them off here, but this is in the downloadable. I put all this stuff here. So basically, you want to make sure that a house is the same. It's within reasonable square footage. Got the numbers here. We have bed bath count that matches, garages, carports, basements. The styles are the same. You know, a bungalow doesn't equal a split level. The age of the build matters. You're not going to compare a 1900s house to a 2000s house. The lot size should be similar. The condition that you're looking for is the condition in which you plan to fix it up in, right? I'm not looking for houses that are in the condition of the one that I'm buying right now. I'm looking for houses that are renovated. That's what I want to compare to. I think that's obvious. By the way, basements and ADUs, those don't count as the same square footage, price per square footage. They're not as valuable as the main part of the house. Okay, number 2 is it must have been sold recently. Sold recently. Sold. Not for sale, sold. This is a huge mistake that people make all the time. Like, well, you know, this house next door is about to sell for $275, and so I can use that as a comp, right? Well, remember my example. I have a house that's getting ready to sell for $275, except for nobody wants to buy it at $275. They want to give me a $200,000 lowball offer. Obviously, it's not worth that. So you don't know until the market's moving. And even if it's pending, you don't actually know what it went under contract for. Maybe I accepted that $200,000 offer. That is going to massively impact the ARV of your house. And the other word there is sold recently. All right. You want to try to use comps that have sold within the last 6 months. Sometimes you're going to push that out just a little bit if the market has been steady and if you can't find 3 to 5 good comps. That might be the first thing I start to fudge. I got a whole fudging list for you here coming up. Number 3 is neighborhood. This is huge, guys. This is where people mess up all the time. I bought a lot of bad deals because I thought I was in the right neighborhood, but a certain boundary actually separated one neighborhood from the other, and one neighborhood was awesome. The other one sucked. I was buying in the sucked neighborhood. So boundaries, you're looking for major roads, highways, railroad tracks, things that if you looked at a map, obviously grid that neighborhood together. Another thing is the actual feel of the neighborhood. I mean, you drive through that, you can tell what is connected to a neighborhood and what is not. It's not like one usually flows into the other. You can get a pretty good sense for it. Also why I hate out-of-state investing, and I'll never do it. Presence means everything. I only invest in my backyard for that exact reason, because I want to know it, I want to feel it, I want to smell it, I want to taste it. Probably not. Not on purpose. And finally, this is the biggest one right here. This is the key. Didn't know this when I first started out. Wish I had. Census tracts. I'm actually pretty dang sure this is what Zillow and those other people use as well, because it's so accurate. All right, not zip codes, but census tracts. Get you a census tract map and look at it. So you're going to combine all those things. You got the feel, you got the boundaries, and you got the census tract. Not a zip code. Zip code is not a neighborhood. I promise you. There are lots of different neighborhoods inside of a specific zip code. And you still can't find your 3 to 5 good comps, and you need to fudge a little bit. Well, like I said, the first thing you might fudge a little bit is date sold, especially if you can confirm that it's been a steady market, or you can compensate for the unsteadiness of it. You are never, ever going to fudge on the proximity. That's the neighborhood. Never. So all we have left is features. I'm certainly not going to go through this whole chart that I made for you here, but literally there's things like If it's got one extra bedroom, here's how much you should fudge it by. $10,000 if the property is under $500,000. If it's over $500,000, you fudge a little bit more. You get the idea. There's a whole chart. It's going to be in the downloadable. Check it out. All right, those are the rules, but now I need to give it the instructions. Rules, instructions, I don't know. These are the steps that I need it to take because otherwise it will be all over the board. So number one is identify the 3 to 5 good comps using the rules that I just gave it. 2 is confirm that the comps are not DOAs or red flags. Remember, I gave you that list of 7 dead on arrivals or red flags. I want her to confirm that none of those are present for the comps that it chose. And 3, I want it to break down the comps to ARV per square foot. This is normalizing the comps. Remember, if it's a $200,000 house that is 1,000 square feet, that's $200 per square foot. You average out the dollars per square foot for each of the houses, and that's what you apply to your subject property. And finally, you're going to look for houses that are currently for sale or pending on the market to disprove or prove that your comps are correct. Remember the example of the $275,000 house that won't friggin' sell. Okay, now we're ready for the final round with my trained bot. But I got to tell you guys, I thought that it was going to be easy to train the bot. I guess this is more complex than how I normally train a bot. Usually you can get away with something super simple. But I was getting some really freaky answers after I put those instructions in. And at first I was just going to be like, oh, well, it's pretty obvious that ChatGPT sucks and it's never going to be as good as me. But after I slept on it, I was like, yeah, I should really try again. Maybe I could get a little bit better. And I failed again. It was still giving me like hallucinations and weird answers, just not accurate, not really any better than the ChatGPT out of the box. In fact, probably worse because it got confused. But I went back like a third, a fourth, and a fifth time. And finally, I got it working right. And I put the instructions, like I said, in that downloadable to what I actually got working. But even at that, okay, it came out with a lot of accuracy. However, there were still 2 huge issues that it had. And you already understand them because it happened before. Number 1 is it missed the flood zone again. I think that maybe it just can't get in and actually read the flood zone info. And this particular property is like right on the edge of it. But I think that's a great case, because when you're comping houses, it's not like you can be, well, like it doesn't miss those things most of the time. What if it does the one time on a property that you buy? And 2 is it missed the house that I have for sale to disprove its valuation. And those are 2 big things that I just cannot afford to let it miss. So overall, here's what I think is ChatGPT is a phenomenal sidekick, great right-hand man, and it can do a lot of the work for you. You see, like in the instructions, I asked it to do a deep dive. I mean, it was thinking for like minutes, up to 5 minutes at one time. Maybe that's an exaggeration. But a lot of time it was thinking, okay, well, that's doing some research that I don't have to do myself. And so basically the way that I train this thing is that it's going to show me what comps it uses and I can go back and say, hey, use some different ones. But like that's the same process that I would go through. So it saves me a lot of time. I can definitely trust that if a property is listed or if a property has been sold and it has been asked to give me the link to the property so I can go on Zillow and actually look directly, which is really nice. Saves me a lot of time. This is basically the theme of the solo house flipper is you don't give blind trust to anything, whether it's a machine, a software, or a subcontractor. I'm going to know what I expect. I'm going to have the frameworks. I'm going to have the knowledge myself. And I'm going to give expectations and I'm going to hold accountability. I am going to lead my organization. I will not give the thanking to somebody else. And that's the same case here. Guys, you have to know what you expect. You got to know the rules that underlie it. Like I said, I put that downloadable in there. So those are my frameworks, my rules for comping a house. There's also that long, boring video if you want to get into it. I know I'm really hiking it up. And anyway, check it out if you want to, or I put another video up here as well if you don't feel like grabbing your coffee and your notebook right now. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.